Let's talk about the power of God's timing. One of the greatest mistakes we often make as human beings is to measure our lives by the ticking of the clock or the turning of the calendar. We grow impatient when the promises we long fought for don't seem to come quickly enough, and we question whether God has forgotten us. But here is the truth: God does not operate on our human schedule. His timing is not only different, it is perfect. And when His moment arrives, it changes everything. Think for a moment about the seed that is planted deep in the soil. For weeks, maybe months, there is no evidence that anything is happening. You water it, you wait, but the surface of the ground looks unchanged. Then suddenly, at the right season, the first sprout pushes through the earth, and what was invisible becomes visible. That is how God works in our lives. He does His greatest work in silence, in the hidden places, while it looks to the world as though nothing is happening. But underground, roots are stretching deep. Foundations are being laid, and character is being shaped. Psychologists tell us that waiting can be one of the hardest experiences for the human mind because it triggers our need for control. We are wired to want results quickly. But spiritually, waiting is one of the most powerful disciplines because it forces us to release control and trust in the one who sees the whole picture. God's timing stretches us, not to break us, but to strengthen the muscles of patience, resilience, and faith. And without those muscles, we could not carry the weight of the blessings He intends to place in our lives. Philosophers have often said that time reveals truth. And this is no less true in matters of the spirit. If you receive a promotion too early, before you have the maturity to handle it, the very thing meant to bless you can crush you. If you step into influence without wisdom, the spotlight can burn you instead of illuminate you. But when God prepares you in His time, you are ready, not just outwardly, but inwardly. You don't merely rise in status, you rise in strength, in clarity, and in vision. Think about the life of Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, sold as a slave, and imprisoned for years. His life looked like one setback after another. If Joseph had judged his destiny by the calendar, he would have given up. But God's timing was weaving every disappointment into a greater design. When the moment was right, Joseph rose from the prison to the palace in a single day. His elevation was sudden, but his preparation had been years in the making. That is the mystery of God's timing. It looks slow to us, but when the hour strikes, it feels sudden and unstoppable. Now, many of us are in seasons where we feel overlooked. We see others being promoted, others being celebrated, and we wonder, when will it be my turn? That's where trust in God's timing becomes essential. Because when God lifts you, it is not because of human connections or because someone did you a favor. It is because He has ordained the moment, and no human hand can shut a door He opens. The people who doubted you, ignored you, or even mocked you will be forced to watch as God reveals what He was building all along. There's also a psychological truth here. The human mind remembers the struggle far longer than the victory. When you finally rise, you will look back at the waiting, the sleepless nights, the unanswered questions, and realize it was not wasted time. It was preparation. Waiting humbles the ego, it teaches discipline, and it strips away our illusion of control. And in that humility, We become vessels that God can trust with greater influence. You see, life is not just about reaching heights. It's about having the strength to remain there. And that strength is forged in the silent seasons where God's timing seems hidden. Just as iron is tested in the fire, so our character is tested in waiting. And when the time comes, we rise not only higher, but wiser, steadier, and stronger. So if you are in a season of delay, do not confuse it with denial. Silence is not absence. Waiting is not abandonment. God is not late. He is precise. And when His timing intersects with your faith, the breakthrough will come in such a way that no one, not even you, will be able to take the credit. And here is the thought I want to leave you with. The clock on your wall may be ticking, but heaven's clock never misses a beat. God is not rushing, and He is not hesitating. He is preparing you for a moment that will arrive exactly when it is meant to. And when it does, you will not just rise, you will soar. When we talk about God lifting you higher, we often imagine a dramatic, public moment where everything changes instantly. Before God reveals you to the world, He hides you. He places you in seasons of obscurity, not because He has forgotten you, but because He is preparing you. There is a divine wisdom in being unseen. It is in those hidden years when nobody is watching that God develops the roots that will sustain you when you are finally on display. Consider the natural world. A tree doesn't begin by standing tall and visible. It begins as a seed buried beneath the soil, unseen, unnoticed. The seed does its most important work underground, stretching roots deeper and deeper into the earth, long before a single leaf is visible to anyone walking by. If you judge that seed too soon, you might conclude that nothing was happening. But the truth is, everything was happening, just in secret. And the deeper the roots, the higher the tree will eventually rise. This principle is as psychological as it is spiritual. Modern psychology tells us that human beings are deeply influenced by the unseen, the subconscious mind, the hidden habits, the internal conversations that no one else hears. These unseen roots determine the visible fruit of our lives. If the inner world is weak, the outer world will eventually crumble. That's why God takes time to shape us in solitude, to strengthen us in silence, so that when the stage comes, we won't collapse under its weight. Philosophers have long reflected on the paradox of visibility. To be seen too soon is often dangerous. When you are elevated before you are prepared, the exposure can destroy you. Think of young leaders, celebrities, or influencers who rise overnight only to fall just as quickly. Their talent may have been enough to get them to the top, but their character was not strong enough to keep them there. Talent is the fruit, but character is the root. And God, in His wisdom, focuses on the root long before He allows the fruit to appear. Biblical history echoes this truth again and again. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before he ever stood before Pharaoh. David was anointed as king while still a boy, but he returned to the fields and the solitude of shepherding long before he sat on the throne. Jesus Himself lived 30 hidden years before beginning 3 short years of public ministry that changed the world. Hidden seasons are not wasted seasons. They are classrooms where God equips us for destiny. Now, here's where this becomes personal. Some of you feel invisible right now. You're working hard. You're faithful. You're doing your best, but no one notices. You might even feel overlooked, as though your contributions don't matter. But invisibility can be God's greatest gift. It protects you from premature exposure. It allows you the freedom to make mistakes, to grow, to learn, without the crushing pressure of constant scrutiny. God hides you so He can heal you, so He can strengthen you, so He can sharpen your vision without distraction. Think about how human nature works. We crave recognition. We want the applause. We long for validation. But recognition that arrives too soon can distort your purpose. If people clap for you before your roots are deep, you may begin to live for their applause instead of for God's approval. That is why the hidden season is so critical. It purifies your motives. When no one is watching and you still remain faithful, you prove to heaven that your commitment is not about being seen, but about being true. This is also why comparison is so dangerous. When you look at someone else who seems to be flourishing, it is easy to think you are behind. But you don't know the depth of their roots. You don't know their hidden battles, their unseen sacrifices. And you certainly don't know the timetable God has written for your life. Stop comparing your underground season to someone else's harvest. Trust the process God has designed uniquely for you. What emerges from this is a deeper understanding of success itself. True success is not merely being seen, it is being ready when you are seen. It is having the strength to stand tall without breaking, to shine brightly without burning out, to lead publicly without collapsing privately. And that kind of success can only be formed in the hidden seasons. So if you feel hidden today, don't despair. If no one is calling your name, if your efforts seem invisible, if your gifts remain unnoticed, remember the seed. Remember that the silence is not punishment, but preparation. What God is doing in you privately will one day be revealed publicly. And when that day comes, you will not only be visible, you will be unshakable. When God begins to lift you, opposition almost always rises alongside it. It may seem paradoxical. Why would a season of promotion also be a season of resistance? But the truth is, elevation and opposition are inseparable. Wherever there is light, there will be shadows. Whenever someone rises, there will be those who question, criticize, or even try to pull them back down. And yet, what often feels like an attack is actually part of the testimony God is writing in your life. There's a simple psychological reality at work here. Human beings have a tendency to resist what disrupts their expectations. When you begin to rise beyond the limits people have placed on you, it unsettles them. Some will resent it, others will doubt it, and a few will actively fight against it. Not because you are doing wrong, but because your elevation forces them to confront their own stagnation. Your progress exposes their excuses. And so the very people you thought would cheer you on may instead become your critics. Philosophers have long observed this dynamic. Socrates once said that when truth appears, it often disturbs the comfort of those content with illusions. In much the same way, when God elevates you, your very presence becomes unsettling to those who prefer you remain as you were. But this opposition is not a sign of failure. It is a confirmation that you are being moved to a higher ground. No one throws stones at trees that bear no fruit. Resistance proves you are carrying something of value. The Bible is full of this pattern. David was celebrated one day for killing Goliath, but the very next season Saul turned against him out of jealousy. Nehemiah tried to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, but faced constant ridicule and threats from enemies determined to stop him. Even Jesus, who healed the sick and brought hope to the broken, was opposed by the very leaders who should have recognized him first. If they faced opposition in their elevation, why should we expect to be exempt? What's striking is how opposition can serve as a refining fire. Psychologically, challenges trigger growth. Resistance builds resilience. Just as muscles cannot grow without weight to push against, the soul cannot deepen without trials to endure. Every critic, every closed door, every betrayal becomes an opportunity for God to strengthen the roots He's already planted in your life. Without opposition, you would never develop the endurance required to sustain the higher levels God intends for you. And here's something worth reflecting on. Opposition often comes not from strangers, but from those closest to you. Joseph was betrayed by his own brothers. Jesus was rejected in his hometown. Sometimes the most painful opposition arises from those who once supported you. Why? Because familiarity blinds people to growth. They remember you as you were, not as you are becoming. They struggle to accept the new season of elevation because it threatens their perception of you. But God allows even this because it teaches you not to depend on human validation, but on divine affirmation. Now, from a philosophical angle, think about how opposition reframes success. We often equate success with ease, but history and scripture both teach the opposite. True success is not the absence of obstacles. It is the ability to rise in spite of them. It is not the applause of the crowd that confirms your calling, but your perseverance when the crowd turns against you. The measure of your strength is not how you act when people support you, but how you stand when they oppose you. This is where faith becomes not just a belief, but a lifeline. When you know God is the one lifting you, the voices of opposition lose their power. People may plot against you, but they cannot overrule the hand of God. They may delay you, but they cannot deny you. And in the end, their resistance becomes the very stage upon which God displays His glory. The same audience that doubted you will become the witnesses of your elevation. I want you to think about this. Every great testimony requires tension. Without Goliath, David would have remained just another shepherd boy. Without Pharaoh, Moses would never have been remembered as a deliverer. Without the cross, there would be no resurrection. Opposition is not an obstacle to your elevation. It is the evidence that elevation is near. So when critics rise, don't be discouraged. When doors close, don't assume God has abandoned you. Instead, see the resistance as a sign that you are carrying something worth fighting for. Trust that God is using even the hostility of others to push you higher, to sharpen your character, and to ensure that when you do rise, the story cannot be explained by human effort alone. There is a truth we all must come to terms with. Promotion does not come from people. It does not come from connections, wealth, titles, or even sheer determination. It comes from God. And this truth, though simple, carries profound implications for how we live, how we work, and how we respond to both success and failure. Because if we believe that our elevation rests solely on human effort, We will either be crushed when others overlook us or corrupted when they applaud us. But if we understand that true promotion is an act of grace, we stand in freedom, free from fear of being forgotten and free from the temptation of pride when we are lifted. In our world today, it is easy to think advancement is entirely about networking, strategy, or playing the right political game. We are told it's not what you know, it's who you know. And while human relationships matter, they are not the ultimate source of destiny. If they were, the poor would never rise, the outsider would never be included, and the broken would never find restoration. But history and scripture prove otherwise. Time and again, we see God bypass the expected channels of power and raise up people no one else would have chosen. Think of David, the overlooked shepherd boy. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king, David's own father didn't even bother to bring him into the room. Yet God said, "Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart." That moment reminds us that divine grace has the power to elevate someone the world ignores. Grace does not operate according to resumes, credentials, or reputations. It operates according to the will and wisdom of God. Philosophically, this principle challenges the very foundation of human pride. If my rise depends entirely on my effort, then I have reason to boast. But if my rise depends on the grace of God, then I must remain humble. This humility is not weakness, it is strength rooted in reality. Because even our talents, even our opportunities, even our drive, all of them are gifts. You didn't choose your birthplace, your natural abilities, or the chance encounters that opened doors. These were orchestrated by a hand greater than your own. And when you recognize this, you stop striving to control every outcome and start trusting in the one who holds the future. From a psychological perspective, this truth frees us from two dangerous traps: comparison and despair. When you believe people control your destiny, you constantly measure yourself against others, competing for approval and validation. If someone else succeeds, you see it as your loss. If someone else is chosen, you feel forgotten. But when you believe God controls your destiny, you understand that no one can take what He has assigned to you. Their blessing does not cancel yours. Their promotion does not delay your own. This mindset frees you from envy and grounds you in peace. It also guards against despair. How many of us have felt defeated because a boss overlooked us, a friend betrayed us, or an opportunity slipped through our fingers? If people are the source of your promotion, then yes, their rejection can destroy you. But if God is the source, then rejection is simply redirection. Closed doors are not the end. They are a signal that God is preparing something greater. What looks like loss may actually be protection. What feels like delay may actually be preparation. And this is why grace is so much more powerful than human favor. Human favor is fragile. It changes with moods, circumstances, and opinions. Today they may love you, tomorrow they may forget you. But divine favor is steady. It cannot be bought, manipulated, or revoked. When God decides to lift you, even those who dislike you may find themselves being used to advance your destiny. Think of Pharaoh's daughter raising Moses, or King Cyrus funding the rebuilding of the temple. Even people outside the faith were used as instruments in God's plan. That is the mystery of grace. It works through means we never expect. But grace does not excuse laziness. We cannot sit idle and expect God to carry us without our participation. Grace works in partnership with faithfulness. Joseph still had to interpret dreams in prison. David still had to tend sheep with excellence. Esther still had to prepare to stand before the king. They did their part. But it was God who multiplied their efforts and opened the doors no one else could. Grace is not an invitation to passivity. It is a call to trust that your faithfulness, even in hidden places, will be honored by the one who sees all. So what does this mean for you? It means you don't need to chase the applause of people. You don't need to compromise your integrity just to fit into someone's system. You don't need to manipulate your way into the spotlight. Because when the time is right, God will open doors that no human hand can shut. And when He does, the world will know it wasn't by your strength, but by His grace. Let me leave you with this: human hands may build ladders, but only God gives wings. Trust His grace more than your grind, and you will discover that when He lifts you, He lifts you higher than you ever imagined possible.